There comes a moment when the life you have lived until now no longer feels like the life you were meant to live. You wake perhaps on an ordinary morning to the faint recognition that something is missing, not in the world around you, but deep inside. You've carried your name, your history, your habits, your roles, like a second skin for decades. Yet now that skin feels too tight, brittle in places, worn thin in others. The old answers, the old ambitions, the old masks no longer shield you. You realize perhaps with a subtle ache that you have been living partly as a stranger to yourself. Jung understood this shift. He knew that the middle and later years bring not simply decline, but the soul's demand for truth. He wrote, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning." And you can feel it, the truth of that sentence pressing against the edges of your awareness. The map you used in youth achievement identity, belonging no longer aligns with the territory you now inhabit. You stand at the threshold of a different kind of journey, one not out into the world, but inward. The voice that once whispered from deep within is no longer content to be ignored. It grows louder, not in volume, but in weight, in the undeniable gravity of its call. It speaks in strange ways in the restlessness of your nights, in the dreams that linger like fog long after waking, in the inexplicable emotions that rise without invitation. It is not asking you to do more, to have more, or to prove more. It is asking you to see. For decades you have worn the persona, the mask shaped by society's expectations, by family's needs, by your own desire to be accepted and respected. This mask served you. It allowed you to navigate the currents of life without revealing too much of the trembling, unguarded self beneath. But now the mask begins to crack. It slips when you are tired, when you are alone, when someone asks a question too direct to deflect. And through the fracture something else peers out, something older than your name, something untouched by applause or disapproval. It is here that the shadow begins to stir. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the part of you that you have banished to darkness. All the feelings, desires, and truths that your mask could not carry have been stored there. You sense it now not as an enemy, but as a locked room in your own house. And the key, inconveniently, is in your hand. At first you resist. You tell yourself you are fine. You keep moving in familiar patterns. But the inner dissonance grows. You notice moments of inexplicable sadness, even in the midst of comfort. You feel irritation at the small hypocrisies of daily life, especially your own. The old pleasures feel strangely hollow, and yet the new longings are still shapeless without name. This is not failure. This is the soul beginning to ask you to come home. There is a loneliness in this stage, a solitude even in company. For you cannot yet explain what is happening inside. You cannot point to a specific wound, and yet you bleed in ways others do not see. Jung understood this as the withdrawal of psychic energy from the outer world, its slow turning inward toward the unconscious. You are being asked, not politely, but by necessity, to meet yourself without disguise. Perhaps your dreams change. They become vivid, symbolic, charged with a strange familiarity. They bring images from forgotten places, figures who speak in riddles, landscapes, both terrifying and beautiful. These are not random illusions. They are the language of the unconscious, sending you messages from the depths that your waking mind cannot yet decode. You may dismiss them at first, but their persistence is a sign your deeper self has begun to participate actively in your life. You might also notice projections falling away. Where once you could easily assign blame or adoration to others, you now sense that what you see in them, the virtues, the faults, the intensity of your reactions, is in fact a mirror. The colleague who irritates you beyond reason, the stranger whose presence inexplicably soothes you, the public figure you despise or idolize, they are each carrying a piece of you that you have not yet owned. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And now you begin to feel the truth of that statement in your bones. This turning point is not dramatic in appearance, but it is seismic within. You are no longer willing to live entirely in the persona, nor can you yet live entirely in the truth of your deeper self. You are between worlds. And this in-between place, uncomfortable, uncertain, and strange, is the threshold of transformation. In this place, you begin to sense the anima or animus stirring the inner counterpart that has always been with you, often hidden behind the business of living. If you are a man, it may come as a sudden sensitivity, a receptivity to beauty and emotion you once kept guarded. If you are a woman, it may appear as a new force of clarity, of decisiveness, of unyielding strength that surprises even you. These are not borrowed traits. They are the balancing forces of your psyche now rising to restore wholeness. You start to understand that life is not asking you to abandon who you have been, but to integrate what you have neglected. The call is not to erase the persona, but to stop confusing it with the self. The self in Jung's sense is the totality of you, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, mortal and eternal. The self is the deep center that has been guiding you all along, even when you could not hear it. And so you begin quietly, uncertainly to listen. You give yourself moments without distraction. You let silence speak. You notice when a conversation leaves you feeling small and when it leaves you feeling more alive. You begin to follow these threads not as tasks to complete, but as paths to explore. Something in you relaxes when you do this, as if you are finally moving in the right direction, even without knowing the destination. You will not yet know the full shape of what is coming. You may still doubt yourself, still cling to old certainties, but the deeper current has been awakened and there is no return to the old shore. You have begun to cross an ocean you did not know you carried inside you, and the horizon, though still distant, holds a light you have not yet seen but have always longed for. You begin to sense that this inward ocean is vast, and that the currents beneath you run far deeper than the life you've known on the surface. It can feel disorienting, this slow recognition that your identity has been in part a carefully constructed story. You have believed in it, fought for it, defended it against doubt. Yet here in the quiet, you start to see the seams in its stitching. You realize that you have been shaped not only by your own choices, but by the invisible hands of family patterns, cultural expectations, and the fears you dared not name. It is unsettling to notice how much of what you called yourself was actually adaptation, a survival mechanism forged in childhood and perfected over years. You wore the clothes they approved of. You spoke the words that wouldn't invite punishment. You achieved in ways that would make you worthy in their eyes. Even your rebellions were in their own way responses to someone else's map of reality. And while this story has carried you, it has also caged you. The unconscious begins to offer you fragments, memories you thought you had outgrown, sudden emotions that seem disproportionate to the moment, flashes of insight that arrive like lightning in a clear sky. These are pieces of the truth beneath the mask. They are not here to condemn you, but to remind you of the wholeness you once knew as a child, before the compromises and distortions of growing up. Jung saw this as the psyche's way of drawing you into individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were trained to be. Yet to step toward this truth is to meet the shadow more directly. The shadow is not only made of the traits you dislike, anger, envy, selfishness, but also of the qualities you have disowned because you were told they were too much or not enough. Perhaps you were taught that your creativity was frivolous, so you hid it. Perhaps your assertiveness was punished, so you learned to stay silent. Now in this turning of life, the shadow rises to show you what you have lost. At first, these encounters may come as irritations or emotional spikes. Someone's boldness might make you uncomfortable, not because they are wrong, but because they embody what you have denied in yourself. Another's tenderness may bring tears to your eyes, not because of their beauty alone, but because it reflects the gentleness you once buried. If you resist these moments, they repeat. If you lean into them, they open a door. You may notice a subtle grief accompanying this stage, the grief for the years you lived at a distance from your own soul. It is not a grief that destroys, but one that softens. It allows you to see that you could not have done differently before. The mask was necessary for survival then. But now survival is not enough. Something in you longs for a deeper vitality, one that cannot be gained by polishing the mask, but only by removing it. Dreams often intensify here. They may confront you with images you do not understand, a stranger who guides you, A crumbling house, an endless staircase, an animal that watches you silently. Each carries meaning if you are willing to sit with it. The house might be your own psyche, its neglected rooms calling for attention. The staircase might be the ascent or descent into layers of yourself long unexplored. The animal might be instinct itself waiting for you to reclaim it. Jung urged that dreams are not to be dismissed as nonsense, for they are the hidden dialogue between conscious and unconscious, the nightly counsel where truth is spoken without censorship. The more you listen, the more you see that life has been speaking to you in symbols all along. The people you've met, the challenges you've faced, the turning points that seemed accidental. Each was a mirror, a messenger, a lesson. Even the suffering you once cursed begins to reveal its strange purpose. Pain has a way of forcing honesty. It strips away the illusions you could not have surrendered willingly. It leaves you naked in front of yourself, unable to pretend that you are fulfilled by what once seemed enough. There is temptation here to retreat into old habits, to distract yourself with busyness, to seek reassurance in familiar roles. But something in you resists now. You feel the falseness in the old rhythms. You sense that each time you deny the inner voice, a kind of dullness seeps into your days. You can no longer convince yourself that safety lies in pretending. And so quietly you begin to experiment with truth. You say what you actually feel in small, careful ways. You decline the invitation that drains you. You allow yourself to linger in the presence of something beautiful without explaining why. These are not grand gestures, but they are revolutionary acts within your psyche. They are signals to the unconscious that you are ready to participate in your own becoming. As this deepening continues, the inner counterpart, the anima or animus, becomes more vivid. She may appear in dreams as a wise, mysterious woman whose presence both unsettles and comforts you. He may emerge as a strong, guiding figure who speaks with authority you trust instinctively. These figures are not fantasies. They are aspects of your own psyche rising into awareness, balancing what has been overdeveloped or suppressed in you. You may feel moments of unfamiliar harmony when your thoughts, feelings, and actions align effortlessly, as though some deeper intelligence has taken the reins. This is not a permanent state, not yet, but it offers a glimpse of the integration you are moving toward. It is the self reminding you that you are more than the sum of your fragments. Still, integration is not achieved by force. It unfolds as you allow what is hidden to be seen, what is wounded to be felt, what is unlived to be welcomed back. You are not discarding the life you've known, but weaving it together with the life you've forgotten. In this weaving, even the shadow becomes an ally. The parts of you that once frightened you begin to reveal their gifts. The anger that protects your boundaries, the sadness that keeps you tender, the desire that fuels creation. You start to realize that you are not just changing, you are remembering. You are remembering what it feels like to be whole. And in that remembering, a quiet strength grows, a strength that does not need approval to stand, that does not fear solitude, that can meet the unknown without flinching. There comes a day when you notice the world around you looks the same, yet you are no longer seeing it through the same eyes. The colors are not brighter exactly, they are truer, more honest. The faces you encounter carry more than their expressions. They carry stories, wounds, and dreams you can almost feel without words. The air itself feels heavier with meaning, as if life has been waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. This shift is not mystical in the sense of being detached from reality. It is mystical because it roots you more deeply into reality than you have ever been. You are no longer moving through life on automatic. The smallest exchanges hold depth. A silence between sentences can speak volumes. You begin to sense how every moment is charged with the unseen, with the unconscious currents shaping not only you but everyone you meet. It is here that your relationship to the persona changes. For years you wore it as if it were the entirety of yourself. Now you wear it lightly, knowing it is a tool, not your skin. In a meeting, in a conversation, in public life, you may still present it the version of you that others can easily understand. But you no longer confuse it with the living truth within. You can set it aside when the moment calls for honesty, and in those moments you feel the air clear, as though truth itself creates more space to breathe. But this clarity also brings responsibility. Seeing yourself more fully means you cannot unsee the ways you've contributed to your own suffering. The relationships you kept long after they had hollowed out the compromises that eroded your spirit, the distractions you embraced to avoid your own silence. There is no cruelty in this recognition. It is not meant to shame you. It is meant to invite you into a deeper authorship of your life. The unconscious has been shaping you all along, whether you acknowledged it or not. It has spoken through your desires, your fears, your habits, your dreams. But now, instead of being a silent driver, it becomes a collaborator. You begin to treat your dreams with reverence, recording them, turning them over in your mind until their symbols start to speak. You notice that a recurring image shifts subtly when you make a change in your waking life, as though the dream world is acknowledging your movement toward wholeness. This collaboration changes how you see others as well. You start to recognize that their outbursts, their projections, their contradictions are often not about you at all, but about their own unacknowledged shadow. You stop taking every reaction personally. Compassion grows not as a deliberate moral effort, but as a natural byproduct of seeing more clearly. You know what it is to be ruled by unexamined forces because you have lived it yourself. And yet this deeper compassion does not mean you abandon boundaries. In fact, your boundaries strengthen. You realize that allowing yourself to be diminished serves no one, not you, not them. You understand now that individuation is not selfishness. It is the act of becoming a whole person so that your presence in the world is authentic, not an echo of someone else's expectations. In this stage, you might feel a strange mingling of loss and liberation. The loss comes from letting go of identities that once defined you: the dutiful child, the relentless achiever, the pleaser, the rebel. You see them now as costumes you wore for certain acts in the play, but the play has moved on. The liberation comes from realizing you can step off the stage entirely when you choose and live not as a role but as yourself. The shadow, too, evolves in your awareness. No longer merely a container for your unwanted traits, it becomes a source of vitality. The anger you once suppressed now fuels your courage to speak. The envy you once felt becomes a guide to what you deeply desire. The fear that once paralyzed you becomes a compass pointing to the exact places where growth is possible. The more you integrate, the less these forces control you unconsciously and the more they serve you consciously. There are moments when this integration feels like a quiet rebirth. You might be walking in the evening and a breeze carries a scent from years ago, childhood summers, a place you once called home. Suddenly you feel the full span of your life at once, the child you were, the adult you became, and the self that has been here through it all, unchanging, beneath the surface of change. There is a stillness in that recognition, a sense of standing at the center of your own being. Jung described the self as the organizing principle of the psyche, the totality that holds both conscious and unconscious in balance. To touch even a glimpse of it is to realize that you are not only your thoughts, not only your past, not only your emotions. You are the space in which they arise, the witness who can hold them without being drowned by them. In this space, life feels both more personal and more universal, as if your individual story is a single thread woven into a vast, intricate tapestry. But the journey is not without its tests. Life will present you with moments that challenge this new awareness. Old triggers will return not to undo you, but to see if you will respond differently now. You may be tempted to retreat into the safety of the persona, but something in you knows that the cost would be too high. You have felt the truth in your bones now, and even discomfort feels more alive than the numbness of denial. You begin to move with a quieter confidence, not because you have conquered life, but because you have stopped trying to conquer it. You allow its seasons, the times of growth, the times of stillness, the times of loss to pass through you without losing your center. You notice that you are less concerned with being right and more concerned with being real. There is a peace that comes from this shift, though it is not a peace born of everything being easy. It is a peace that comes from alignment, from living in such a way that you no longer betray yourself for acceptance, no longer barter your soul for comfort. And in this alignment, even the simplest moments, a shared glance, the sound of rain, the taste of a familiar meal, carry a fullness that once eluded you. You start to see that the journey inward is not an escape from the world, but the only way to truly inhabit it. And this, more than anything, is what changes at 60 or at any threshold where the soul decides it is time you are finally ready to live, not from the mask, but from the marrow. There is a certain silence that comes when the noise of old ambitions fades. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, as though life has set down its constant demands and is simply sitting beside you, waiting. It is in this silence that you begin to hear what was always speaking beneath the rush, the quiet pulse of your own being. You notice that time itself feels different now. The days are no longer a ladder you must climb toward some imagined summit. They are more like tides, each with their own rhythm and character. Some wash over you with ease, others pull you into deeper waters without warning. But even in the pull, you sense a trust growing, a recognition that you no longer need to cling to every shore. The self knows how to navigate these currents in a way the ego never could. The ego, after all, has spent a lifetime trying to secure itself, building fortresses out of achievements, relationships, identities. It has worked tirelessly to keep you safe, respected, in control. And yet, beneath all that effort, there has always been a subtle fear, the fear that without these walls, you would be nothing. The work of individuation reveals the opposite. When the walls thin, you discover that what you are is not the fortress, but the life moving through it. This is where the unconscious begins to feel less like a stranger and more like an old companion you are finally allowing into the light. You realize that the impulses, dreams, and intuitions you once dismissed were often wiser than the plans your conscious mind could construct. The unconscious has been carrying your unlived life, the paths you didn't take, the qualities you exiled, and now it begins to place them gently into your hands. Sometimes this return is joyful. A long-forgotten passion stirs again, and you feel the kind of energy you thought belonged only to youth. You may find yourself creating without agenda, simply for the delight of it, writing words that surprise you, painting shapes you did not plan, moving your body in ways that feel ancient and free. Other times the return is painful. Old wounds resurface not to torment you, but to be healed with the presence you could not offer them before. The child who was silenced is given a voice. The grief you buried decades ago is allowed to breathe. There is a tenderness in these moments, a tenderness toward yourself that perhaps you have never known. You begin to see that compassion is not something you must extend outward before it can exist. It must first root itself in how you meet your own inner life. This is not indulgence. It is the foundation for every authentic connection you will have with others. Your relationships shift in subtle but profound ways. You are less willing to participate in conversations that revolve around masks, the small performances of image and status. You hunger for exchanges where the soul is present, where someone speaks not just to be heard but to be known. This hunger may mean that some connections fade, and though it stings, you begin to understand that space is being made for relationships that can meet you where you are now. You also notice that projection loses some of its grip. When someone's behavior triggers a surge of emotion, you pause and ask, what part of me is being reflected here? Sometimes the answer is humbling. You see in them a shadow you've tried to avoid. Sometimes it is empowering. You recognize in them a quality you long to reclaim. This kind of self-honesty is not always comfortable, but it liberates you from the endless cycle of blame and defense. Dreams may now feel like deep conversations with the self. You awaken with images so vivid they stay with you through the day. A key placed in your hand, a bird flying through an open window, a road that vanishes into mist. You sense that these are not random scenes, but living symbols carrying layers of meaning that unfold the more you contemplate them. Jung once said, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul." And here at this stage of your life, you begin to feel what it means to step through that door consciously. The anima or animus too takes on a more integrated form. If she once appeared as a distant muse in dreams, she now walks beside you as intuition, creativity, emotional depth. If he once arrived as a heroic figure, he now grounds himself in your everyday choices, in the way you assert truth, the way you protect your boundaries, the way you move with purpose. They are no longer opposites to be balanced, but energies in dialogue, each completing the other within you. You find that individuation is not a single event, but a continual unfolding. Each insight opens a deeper question. Each integration reveals another layer waiting in the shadows. And while this might have once felt exhausting, now it feels like aliveness. The journey is no longer something to finish. It is the way you live. There are moments of revelation, moments when you catch sight of yourself not as the roles you've played but as the consciousness that has witnessed every role. In these moments, a profound peace seeps into you, as if you are standing at the center of a vast circle, watching the seasons of your own becoming passed through. You are not clinging to spring nor resisting winter. You are holding them both as part of the same whole. And perhaps most surprising of all, you begin to experience a subtle joy in the unknown. Where once uncertainty was a threat, it now feels like an open sky. You realize that not knowing allows life to surprise you, to meet you in ways the ego's control could never have imagined. The soul thrives in this openness. It was never seeking certainty, it was seeking freedom. And so you keep walking, not toward a fixed destination, but in rhythm with something older and wiser than your plans. The quiet, steady movement of the self, drawing you ever closer to your own center. It is strange how the deeper you go into yourself, the more the world outside begins to change. Not in its form, the streets are still the same, the seasons still turn, but in its texture. The way sunlight rests on a wall feels like a kind of message. The way a stranger's eyes meet yours holds an unspoken recognition, as if somewhere beyond conscious memory you have known each other before. The ordinary shimmers with the weight of the symbolic, and you realize it always has. It was you who could not see it until now. This is the gift of living in dialogue with the unconscious. The world becomes alive again. You are no longer just moving through it. You are participating in it. Every encounter becomes an exchange between inner and outer, between the self and the living fabric of existence. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem too precise to be random. You notice them now more often, the book that arrives just as you need it, the conversation that answers a question you have not spoken aloud, the dream that mirrors something in waking life with eerie accuracy. These moments are not magic tricks. They are signs that you are no longer divided from yourself. The unconscious is no longer whispering from behind closed doors. It is speaking through the events of your life. And when you listen, life feels less like a series of accidents and more like a conversation you are meant to take part in. But this new way of being is not without its challenges. To live authentically means you can no longer hide in the safety of pretense. There will be moments when speaking your truth disrupts the harmony of the room, when following what feels real means disappointing someone else's expectations. The temptation to retreat into the persona will arise, but you begin to understand that each time you choose the mask over the soul, a small part of you recedes. The cost is too high now. There is courage in this stage, not the loud courage of conquest, but the quiet courage of remaining true in the face of misunderstanding. You no longer need everyone to see you. You need to see yourself clearly and stand in that clarity even when it leaves you standing alone. And yet in this solitude you discover you are not abandoned. There is a companionship within, a steady presence that has been growing stronger as you have drawn closer to the self. Your relationship to suffering changes as well. You no longer see it only as something to escape, but as a teacher that shapes you in ways comfort never could. The pain you have endured has stripped away illusions, deepened your empathy, sharpened your discernment. You start to feel gratitude even for the darker chapters, for without them, you would not have been led to this inner ground. The shadow once feared now stands beside you as an ally, a source of power, honesty, and depth. Dreams continue to guide you, and you begin to notice their rhythm. Some nights they are clear, their symbols sharp as glass. Other nights they are tangled and opaque, as if the psyche is turning the soil of your inner life in preparation for seeds you cannot yet see. You learn patience here, the understanding that not every symbol needs to be decoded immediately, that some truths reveal themselves only when you are ready to live them. In your waking life, you sense that you are moving toward a kind of integration that cannot be forced. The anima and animus, the shadow and the light, the conscious and the unconscious, all are learning to speak to each other within you. There is less war, more conversation. You stop trying to exile parts of yourself and instead ask what they need, what role they might play in your wholeness. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Conflicts that once consumed you lose their grip not because they vanish, but because you no longer meet them as a fractured self. You meet them as a center in which many voices coexist, the decisive one and the hesitant one, the joyous one, and the grieving one, each with a place at the table. This is what it means to live as the self, to hold the multiplicity of your being without needing to split or deny. You begin to notice that the future, which once loomed like a question demanding answers, no longer frightens you. You do not need to predict its exact shape. You are learning to trust that the same inner current that has brought you here will carry you onward. This trust is not passive. It calls for attentiveness, for listening, for responding when life places something before you. But it frees you from the restless chase for certainty. At 60, or whenever the soul reaches this threshold, there is a quiet revolution. The urgency to prove, to compete, to become someone in the eyes of the world fades into something deeper. The desire to simply be who you already are in the eyes of your own soul. You no longer measure life by how much you have amassed or accomplished, but by how fully you have inhabited your own depths. And in those depths you find something unexpected, a wellspring of energy, not the frantic energy of youth, but a steady flame that does not burn out. It is the energy of alignment, of living in harmony with what is true for you. This is the beginning of a different kind of vitality, one that can sustain you through the years ahead, because it does not depend on the outer world's approval. The world may not see this change immediately. Outwardly, your life might look much the same, but you know, and you feel it in every breath you have crossed into a place where you are no longer seeking permission to exist. You are here fully, and the life that unfolds from this place will be unlike anything that came before. You have lived long enough to know that life will keep changing whether you resist or not. But now change no longer feels like an intrusion. It feels like a tide you have learned to swim with, a rhythm you trust, even when it carries you into unfamiliar waters. This trust is not naive. It has been earned through the long labor of meeting yourself honestly, of facing the shadow, of letting go of the masks that once defined you. The deeper you go, the more you see how every part of your journey has been essential. Even the mistakes, even the detours, even the seasons you thought were wasted. There was no wasted season. Every joy carved space in you for more joy. Every grief hollowed you so that you could hold more compassion. Every ending created the conditions for a new beginning to root. The unconscious was never against you. It was guiding you toward a truth you could only meet at this stage of your life. And that truth is this: the self you have been searching for is not some perfected version waiting at the end of the path. It has been here from the beginning, whole, even in your fragmentation, patient, even in your resistance. Individuation is not about becoming something new. It is about becoming transparent enough that the self can live through you without obstruction. There is a lightness in this, even a quiet joy. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to everyone, nor to control how you are perceived. The endless effort to manage your image dissolves, freeing energy for what truly matters: the relationships that nourish you, the work that feels meaningful, the simple pleasures that anchor you in the present. You are less concerned with legacy and more concerned with aliveness, with inhabiting this moment fully knowing it will never come again. Your dreams may now carry a different tone. They are less urgent, less fragmented. They feel more like conversations with a trusted friend than cryptic messages from a stranger. Sometimes they affirm what you already know in your waking life. Sometimes they offer images so beautiful or strange that they stay with you for days, subtly rearranging the way you see the world. You no longer demand immediate interpretation. You allow the symbols to do their quiet work on you, shaping your inner landscape in ways the conscious mind cannot rush. Your relationship with the shadow reaches a kind of peace. It is no longer an adversary to be defeated, but a companion whose perspective you respect. You understand now that the shadow's emotions, the anger, the jealousy, the fear, are not enemies but signals alerting you to where something in your life is misaligned or unlived. You listen, you adjust, you integrate. In this way, the shadow becomes a guardian of your authenticity. The anima, or animus too, feels fully alive within you now. You are no longer reaching for them as if they exist outside you. You are living with their qualities woven into your being. The creative sensitivity of the anima flows naturally in your choices. The assertive clarity of the animus stands behind your words. They are no longer separate figures in dreams, but inner resources that give balance and wholeness to how you move in the world. Perhaps the most unexpected change is how you now experience time. You are not rushing toward the future nor clinging to the past. The present has become enough not as a concept, but as a lived reality. You find yourself lingering over things you once overlooked, the warmth of your hands around a cup of tea, the way the afternoon light shifts across the floor, the sound of a friend's voice when they laugh without restraint. These moments are not filler between important events. They are the life itself. And in this presence, something else reveals itself, a sense of belonging that is not tied to place, role, or relationship. You belong because you exist. You belong because you are part of the same fabric that weaves the trees, the rivers, the stars. This belonging does not need proof, and it cannot be taken away. It is the quiet foundation on which your life now rests. From here you see that the journey is not about reaching some final state of enlightenment where all questions vanish. The questions remain, but they no longer feel like threats. They are companions, reminders that life is alive in you still, that there is more to discover, more to create, more to love. The self does not close the book. It turns the page. And so you move forward not as someone chasing a goal, but as someone walking home to a center within that has been waiting for you all along. The road may twist, the seasons may turn, but the center remains. You remain. This is the change that begins at 60, or at whatever age the soul decides to awaken fully, the shift from striving to being, from proving to embodying, from living on the surface to living from the depths. It is not the end of your story, but the moment you begin to write it with the ink of your truest self. You step into the years ahead with nothing to hide, nothing to defend, and everything to live. And as you do, the world itself seems to open in response, as if it too has been waiting for this meeting between who you are and who you were always meant to be.
You hear the doorbell. Just once, maybe twice. A familiar chime, yet something inside you tenses. Not fear, not anger, but a kind of inner protest, like your soul flinching before your body does. You pause. You do not rush to answer. In fact, you hesitate. A quiet voice within you whispers, "Please, not now, not today." And even though nothing dangerous waits on the other side of that door, something inside you feels intruded upon, violated even by the mere idea of presence, not because the visitor is unkind, but because they are present. And that presence, however innocent, feels like too much. If you've ever felt this way, you are not alone. And no, you're not rude, you're not broken, and you're certainly not antisocial. What you are is listening to something most people have long since forgotten, the quiet voice of the inner self, calling for stillness. It starts as a subtle dissonance, a tension that appears out of nowhere the moment your sanctuary is threatened by social obligation. A knock on the door, a phone call, an invitation. You feel it in your chest, a pulling back like your soul withdrawing behind a curtain. But you smile anyway. You open the door. You pour the coffee, make the small talk laugh at the right times. And afterward, when they've left and the door's shut, you breathe as if you've just escaped something, not because of them, but because of what their presence stirred in you. Exhaustion not of the body, but of the soul. Carl Jung understood this phenomenon in ways few ever have. When he spoke of introversion, it was not a matter of personality types or social preferences. It was about energy, about direction. Jung saw the introvert as one whose psychic energy flows inward into the depths, into the hidden places of the mind. For the introvert, being alone is not just a preference, it is a return. A recommunion with one's inner sanctuary. To be constantly available to others, even for small moments, is to have that sanctuary breached. And so your unease with visitors is not a flaw. It is a protective reflex, an instinct that says my inner world is sacred, and it is not always open for visitation. But this discomfort goes deeper still. It is not only the draining of energy that unsettles you, it is the way someone else's presence alters the atmosphere of your home, your mirror. Jung believed the house is a profound symbol of the self, each room representing a part of your psyche, the bedroom your privacy, the kitchen your nourishment, the living room your social persona, the attic your higher mind, the basement your unconscious. So when someone enters this space, they are not merely stepping onto your carpet, they are stepping into your soulscape. And your unconscious knows it. Even if the conscious mind insists everything is fine, you sense it in subtle ways. The room feels smaller. The silence changes shape. You are no longer moving freely through your own thoughts, because now there is a performance, a pressure. An invisible script has appeared in your hands. This is the work of the persona, the mask Jung said we all must wear to exist in society. But the trouble begins when you are forced to wear it in your own home. Your place of shedding masks, not donning them. And that's where the dissonance becomes pain. You find yourself performing not dramatically but subtly. You manage expressions, you adjust your words, you mind your posture. You speak when you're not ready. You hold in truths that want to breathe. And with every minute your energy slips further away like water through cupped hands. By the time the visitor leaves, you're hollow. The mask remains and your true self retreats even deeper. And here's the truth. You may have feared was selfish. You are allowed to not want visitors. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your space without explanation. Because not every soul is nourished by company. Some are nourished by solitude. Some grow only in silence. And that silence is not empty. It is full of you, full of memory, full of presence that cannot exist when another's energy fills the room. Jung called this retreat into solitude the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are beneath all the roles, expectations, and projections. Individuation is not achieved through interaction, but through integration. And integration requires solitude, reflection, space. So when your body recoils from a knock at the door, it is not rejecting the other, it is embracing the self. The inner hermit, the archetype of sacred withdrawal, is calling you back to the cave where transformation begins. There is a reason monasteries are silent, a reason seekers climb mountains alone. In silence, the noise of the world dies down. The inner voice grows louder. The soul begins to whisper truths you forgot you knew. And sometimes those truths come in the form of resistance not to people but to interruption. Because you were not made for constant exposure. You were made for depth. Perhaps you've always known this but felt ashamed to say it. That you prefer your own company. That conversations often feel like disruptions. That the presence of others, no matter how kind, can overwhelm you. But Carl Jung would not shame you. He would say you are listening to your own psychic rhythms, and that is rare. He would say the discomfort you feel is not a disorder. It is a signal. It means your soul is still alive. So next time the doorbell rings and your heart drops, don't rush to judge yourself. Pause. Listen. Ask what part of you feels invaded. What space within you was not ready to open? The answer might not come immediately, but if you are quiet enough, you'll feel it. A whisper, faint but clear. Protect this silence, this solitude. It is not loneliness. It is the womb of who you are becoming. And when you heed that whisper, when you protect your silence instead of pushing it aside, something miraculous begins to happen. You begin to feel whole again. As if all the scattered parts of you once exiled by forced social obligations are slowly returning home. This is not withdrawal in the pathological sense. It is reclamation. The recentering of yourself after being pulled in too many directions. And once you've tasted that kind of peace, not the peace that comes from quiet surroundings, but the deeper peace that rises when you are in full alignment with your inner truth, it becomes harder and harder to pretend. The tension you feel with visitors is not rooted in rudeness. It is rooted in depth. Because the moment someone crosses the threshold into your space, a transformation occurs. The psyche shifts from authentic presence to psychological posture. You don't do this consciously. It's a reflex, a legacy of all the moments in life when you had to be someone you weren't just to keep the peace, just to be liked, just to survive. And now, when you are finally safe in your own space, that mask tightens again. And the body remembers this is the cost of performance. Even when it's subtle, even when it's well-meaning. Carl Jung warned of the danger of mistaking the persona for the self. He said, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." When you spend too much time living from that mask, especially in your sanctuary, the soul begins to suffocate, because you are being seen but not known, heard but not felt, present but not real. And that is perhaps the most painful kind of loneliness, the loneliness of not being able to fully be yourself in your own home. But something else is happening too, something deeper. Because when you recoil from a visit, when you feel exhausted after social contact, you are not merely reacting to the present moment. You are responding to a lifetime of subtle violations. Moments when your space, your silence, your needs were ignored. Times when you had to be pleasant when you were in pain. Times when you had to entertain others while secretly falling apart inside. The body remembers. The psyche remembers. And so your discomfort now is not just about today. It is the echo of all those yesterdays ringing in the present, asking, when will you finally protect your sacred space? Jung spoke often of the shadow. The repressed, rejected parts of ourselves that live in the unconscious. When someone enters your home, your sacred space, they don't just trigger social discomfort. They stir the shadow. Sometimes it's the way they speak, or the way they move, or a story they tell, and suddenly something dormant awakens in you, an old fear, an irritation, a forgotten wound. You feel unsettled, but you don't know why, because the discomfort doesn't match the moment. That's how the shadow works. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in reactions, and so you learn to be vigilant. You become sensitive to energies, to tones, to subtle shifts in atmosphere. Some call this being too sensitive, but Jung would not pathologize your sensitivity. He would honor it, because that sensitivity is the language of the unconscious. And when you live close to your unconscious, when you walk the path of individuation, you no longer ignore the signs. You don't suppress the recoil, you explore it. You ask what it wants to tell you. Sometimes the discomfort is not about the person at all. It is about what their presence prevents you from doing. When someone enters your space, you can no longer sit in silence. You can no longer be fully yourself. You are pulled out of the flow of your inner life, a life that was moving gently, rhythmically, inwardly. And the loss of that flow feels like violence. Not loud, not obvious, but quiet psychic violence, the kind that tears you from your own current and tosses you into the shallow surface of politeness. You've likely tried to explain this to others. Tried to say, "It's not you, I just need space." But the world doesn't always understand. We live in a culture that praises availability, rewards extroversion, celebrates the constant exchange of energy. But Jung knew the deeper movements of the soul happen in solitude, in withdrawal, in the quiet hours when nothing is required of you and you can finally listen to the inner voice without interruption. That voice doesn't shout. It whispers, and if someone is talking even kindly, you can't hear it. So no, you're not broken for wanting to be alone. You're brave. You are reclaiming the most precious thing you have, your attention. Not the attention you give others, but the attention you offer to your own depths. That attention is the path to wholeness, to truth, to self. And when you give yourself permission to protect it, you begin to heal not just from the fatigue of today, but from the lifelong pressure to be someone you're not. It takes courage to choose yourself, to close the door gently without guilt, to trust that solitude is not absence, but presence, that silence is not emptiness, but fullness. And in that choice, you meet the truest part of you, the part that's been waiting all along. Not for company, but for you. There is a moment, it often comes quietly, when you finally sit down after declining a visit and you feel something you hadn't noticed was missing. A sense of coming home, not to your apartment or your house, but to your inner world. The tension in your shoulders softens. The noise in your head begins to fade. And beneath all that static, you start to hear something deeper, your own presence. This is not mere comfort. This is reunion. And it's in that moment you realize your discomfort with visitors was never about dislike. It was about disconnection. Every unwanted interruption is a severing from yourself. And each time you choose solitude, you're not escaping others, you're reuniting with your soul. Carl Jung understood this sacred return better than most. He didn't romanticize withdrawal. He didn't say solitude was always pleasant, but he knew it was necessary. Because individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, doesn't happen when you're constantly adapting to the needs of others. It happens when you begin to feel your own contours, your limits, your truth. When you stop shape-shifting and start standing still. In solitude, the mask of the persona begins to melt. And what's revealed beneath isn't polished or perfect. It's real. That realness can be disorienting. Especially at first. When you stop performing and start listening, you may discover just how much of your life has been spent in adaptation, being nice, being present, being available. So many words used to reward self-abandonment, but Jung saw through this. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are means learning to disappoint others sometimes in order to remain loyal to yourself. You might feel guilty the first few times you say no. You might imagine the visitor standing outside your door puzzled, maybe even hurt. But you're not rejecting them, you're respecting yourself. And in the long run, those who truly love you will feel that distinction. They will know your no is not a wall, but a doorway back into your authenticity, a gesture of honesty, not hostility. Because something profound happens when you choose solitude consciously. You start to feel things more vividly. The light pouring through the window, the quiet hum of your thoughts, the way your body feels when it's not preparing for performance. It's in these moments, the quiet, the ordinary, that the soul begins to speak again. And what it says is never loud, never dramatic, but it is always honest. And honesty is what the soul is starving for in a world of masks. There's a reason people feel lost, even when surrounded by friends. A reason you can feel lonelier in a room full of conversation than in the stillness of your own space. Because true connection doesn't begin outside you. It begins within. Until you are connected to yourself, no amount of company will feel satisfying. And once you are connected, you no longer crave noise to fill the silence. Because the silence is no longer empty. It's alive. But there's another truth hidden beneath all this. One, you may not have allowed yourself to fully acknowledge. That the need for solitude isn't just about rest, it's about safety. The world, even with its beauty, can often feel like a place of constant intrusion. Opinions, judgments, expectations, they pour in from every direction. And for those attuned to the deeper layers of reality, those who feel more, see more sense, more, it can be overwhelming. To be alone, then, is not a rejection of others. It's a return to psychic safety, a chance to exhale without being watched. Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." You've probably felt that. The ache of sharing space with someone and yet feeling completely unseen. The tension of smiling while your soul is whispering, "This isn't where I want to be." That is a particular kind of sorrow, to be surrounded yet disconnected. And it's in that sorrow that many finally realize solitude isn't the cause of the ache, it's the remedy. And this is where the archetype of the hermit enters not as a symbol of isolation, but of inner depth. The hermit in Jungian psychology is not a recluse fleeing the world. He is a seeker, a guardian of the soul's wisdom. He walks alone not because he fears people, but because he hears something they cannot. A call from within. And he knows that to answer that call, he must be still. He must be alone. Not forever, but long enough to listen. You carry that hermit within you. Every time you close the door gently. Every time you turn down an invitation without guilt. Every time you choose stillness over stimulation, that is the hermit taking your hand and saying, Let's go inward now. And it is in that inward space, that quiet, sacred terrain, that you begin to feel again. To think without filters, to dream without interruption. To remember who you were before the world told you who to be. This is not loneliness, this is inner fidelity. And while others may never understand why visitors drain you, why silence feels like oxygen you no longer need them to, you understand, and that understanding is freedom. It frees you from apology, from guilt, from the need to explain. You are no longer trying to justify your solitude. You are living it, honoring it, becoming whole inside it. And perhaps now, after everything you felt and realized, you begin to see the beauty in the very discomfort you once tried to resist. That quiet dread at the sound of the doorbell, it wasn't just a reaction. It was a sacred signal, a flare from the soul saying, this moment does not belong to them, it belongs to you. And how many times in your life have you given your moments away? How many times have you opened your door literally or metaphorically, while your inner world was pleading for you to keep it closed just a little longer? We are taught to equate presence with goodness, that being available means being kind, that to decline is to reject love itself. But Jung invites you to reconsider this. True love, he said, begins with the self. Until you can say yes to your own silence, your own rhythms, your own sanctuary, every yes to others carries within it a no to yourself. And how long can anyone live like that before something essential begins to wither? This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. And in clarity, love becomes more honest. Because when you love from a place of self-connection, your presence is no longer an obligation. It's a gift. You're no longer performing, pretending, draining yourself to uphold a false harmony. You are showing up whole. And sometimes the truest love is in the boundary, in the pause, in the breath you take before letting anyone else in. The home in Jung's symbolic language is a living expression of the soul. The rooms, the walls, the door, all metaphors for your psychological architecture. So when someone enters your home, they enter more than your physical space. They step into your symbolic self. And if that self is unprepared, uncentered, unreplenished, the visit becomes more than a social event. It becomes a psychic intrusion. You may smile and laugh and do all the right things, but your soul knows. It always knows. That's why the discomfort can feel so disproportionate, so sudden. You were fine a moment ago. But now, something within you recoils. Not from the person, but from the shift, from the transition out of sacred solitude into the realm of performance. And every time you override that recoil, you chip away at your own center. But when you honor it, when you let yourself stay in silence, something remarkable happens. The center grows stronger. And that center is where real transformation begins. Jung called this transformation, individuation, the slow, deep process of becoming whole. Not perfect. Whole, that means integrating all your parts, the kind one, the tired one, the frustrated one, the peaceful one. It means no longer forcing yourself to be one version of you for the sake of appearances. And it starts in your relationship to your own space. When you choose not to entertain, when you choose not to pretend, when you say, I matter too much to drain myself today. This decision, though seemingly small, is revolutionary. Because the world pushes you toward fragmentation. Toward pleasing, performing, pacifying. But individuation demands integrity. And integrity often looks like solitude. Not to punish, not to hide, but to heal, to gather yourself again, to collect the scattered threads of your energy and weave them into something real. And here's what few people tell you: there is power in silence. Not just peace, not just rest, power. The kind of power that comes from alignment. When your outer world matches your inner truth, when your actions no longer contradict your feelings, when you can sit alone in a room and feel more alive than you ever did in a crowd. That is sacred solitude. And it's yours, not because you earned it, but because it's your birthright. You may have been made to feel ashamed of your need for space. You may have been called antisocial, cold, distant, but those who say this often fear what they don't understand. Because to live in silence, to truly live in it, requires courage. It requires facing what the noise hides. And you who have chosen that path are not weak. You are brave beyond measure. You are not escaping life. You are deepening into it. The outer world is loud. It rewards speed, visibility, accessibility. But the inner world moves differently. It moves slowly, like the turning of the earth. It rewards presence, depth, silence. And when you align with that rhythm, you stop rushing. You stop apologizing. You stop explaining yourself to people who only understand noise. And in that stillness, you begin to remember who you are when no one is looking. Perhaps that's the greatest gift of solitude. It returns you to yourself. It strips away the masks, the performances, the borrowed identities. And it leaves you with what's real. And what's real is not always easy. Sometimes it's raw. Sometimes it's tender. Sometimes it's tired. But it is always, always sacred. And once you feel the sacredness of your own presence, you can never give it away so easily again. So the next time the knock comes and your soul tenses, don't ignore it. Listen. That tension is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is your reminder that you are not a resource for others to consume. You are a soul with boundaries and needs and sacred rhythms. And it is not only okay to protect, that it is essential. It is essential because every time you say yes to something that hollows you, you say no to the very center of your being. And you've done that long enough, haven't you? You've opened the door with a smile while your chest screamed for stillness. You've poured tea and engaged in conversation when what you really needed was to be left in silence, barefoot, wrapped in the softness of your own breath. That kind of self-betrayal is so quiet, so normalized, that most people don't even recognize it for what it is. But your soul does. And it keeps the score. That's why the fatigue you feel after a visit isn't just social exhaustion. It's spiritual depletion, because every moment you spend denying your inner truth, you distance yourself from the self, that deep living presence at the core of you. Jung believed that true healing begins the moment you stop splitting off from yourself. When you stop showing up in fragments and begin to live from the center. But to find that center, you must first enter the silence. Not the outer silence, but the inner one. The kind that can only be accessed when there are no witnesses. When the door is closed, the phone is off, and you finally truly arrive in your own presence. Do you know how rare that is? Most people never experience themselves fully. They are always in motion, always in conversation, always adjusting. But you have glimpsed that quiet center. And maybe that's why you can't tolerate visitors the way others do, because you know the cost. You know that the minute someone enters your space, even with good intentions, something within you must recede. Not forever, but long enough to lose your alignment. And when you've worked so hard to find it, to cultivate it, to protect it, the thought of losing it even for a short while feels unbearable. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Jung often spoke of the inner life as a sanctuary. A temple where the psyche meets the divine. And just like you wouldn't let anyone walk into a temple disrespectfully, you cannot allow every energy to enter your space without discernment. Your home, your room, your solitude, they are not empty places. They are alive, filled with your memories, your healing, your rituals. And each time you choose to guard that space instead of defaulting to social norms, you are saying, this temple matters. My wholeness matters. But you were not taught this language. You were taught to host, to accommodate, to be polite, to put others at ease even when it meant losing your own peace. And maybe you were praised for it, called generous, called kind. But at what cost you learned to dim your truth for the sake of harmony. And now, as you unlearn that pattern, as you begin to say no and protect your sacred quiet, you may feel like you're doing something wrong. You're not. You're finally doing something right. This is the work of individuation. It is not grand or dramatic. It's found in the smallest acts. The pause before answering the door. The silence instead of explanation. The breath you take to choose yourself. And each of these moments becomes a thread in the tapestry of your becoming. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And he was right. Because to accept yourself completely means accepting your need for solitude without guilt. It means trusting that your soul knows the way, even when the world says otherwise. You don't owe anyone your presence. You don't have to be available just because someone asks. You don't need a reason to close the door. Your soul is reason enough. Your peace is reason enough. And those who are truly meant for you will not demand access. They will wait until you are ready. They will respect your silence because they sense the sacredness within it. In time, you may find that you can open the door again, not because you feel obligated, but because your soul is full enough to welcome connection. That's the paradox. The more you honor your solitude, the more authentic your relationships become. No longer based on performance, but on presence. No longer rooted in guilt, but in choice. And that kind of connection born from wholeness is the only kind worth having. But for now, if your heart pulls away at the sound of footsteps approaching your door, let it. If your body resists the visit, listen. These signals are sacred. They are your truth, trying to speak through the noise. And the more you listen, the more fluent you become in your own language. The language of silence. The language of depth. The language of the soul. You were never meant to be constantly open. Even the ocean has tides. Even the sky has nights. You are allowed to ebb, to retreat, to vanish for a while, and come back fuller. You are not a machine of endless access. You are a living, breathing soul who deserves the dignity of inner rhythm. Jung would tell you that this is not a luxury, it is a necessity. For those walking the path of inner truth, solitude is not a preference. It is the very soil in which the self takes root. And in this soil, in your silence, in your space, something beautiful is blooming, not loudly, not publicly, but deeply, and no one needs to see it for it to be real. It is yours. It has always been yours. And perhaps now you're beginning to feel it, that subtle yet undeniable shift. A sense that what you once experienced as a personal flaw is in truth a doorway. The discomfort with visitors, the craving for silence, the urge to be left alone. These were never symptoms of dysfunction. They were the early signs of awakening. Not a spiritual awakening filled with fireworks and visions, but the quieter kind. The kind that begins in the bones. The kind that whispers instead of shouts. The kind that calls you back to yourself inch by inch. Carl Jung would say you are not merely withdrawing, you are descending. Into the depths. Into the inner chambers of the psyche. Into the parts of you that have waited years, maybe decades for your attention. And as with any descent, the world above becomes distant. Conversations feel shallow, visits feel intrusive. Not because the people are wrong, but because the surface no longer satisfies. You are no longer nourished by the usual distractions. You crave something more, not more stimulation, but more stillness, more truth, more presence. This is the calling of the hermit within. That ancient archetype Jung spoke of, the solitary figure who walks the inner terrain of the soul by lantern light. The hermit does not reject the world. He simply knows that truth cannot be found in noise. And so he retreats, not to escape, but to remember. And you, whether you realize it or not, have answered that same call. You felt the hunger for solitude not as loneliness, but as necessity, a holy necessity. And now your life is beginning to reorganize around that truth. You no longer rush to say yes. You no longer explain yourself away. You let your no be clear. You let your silence be enough. And in that clarity, something sacred is born: self-respect. Not the kind that needs validation, but the kind that lives quietly in your bones. The kind that no one can take from you. And yes, the world may push back. It may call you distant, difficult, cold. But Jung taught that the journey to wholeness often invites misunderstanding. Because to individuate, to become who you truly are, is to step outside the collective dream. It is to stop playing the roles others have written for you. It is to write your own script in your own time, in your own space. And that space often requires solitude. Not sometimes. Often. Because in solitude you begin to see with new eyes. You notice how much energy you gave away for nothing. How often you ignored your inner no. How many smiles were worn like armor just to avoid conflict? And in seeing this, you begin to reclaim your sovereignty, moment by moment, choice by choice. You become less interested in pleasing and more devoted to listening not to others but to yourself. You find yourself moving slower, speaking less, feeling more. You become attuned to the subtle shifts within you. The way your breath changes when you're alone. The way your thoughts become clearer in the absence of performance. The way your nervous system begins to relax when there is no one else to manage. This is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough. You are unlearning a lifetime of false belonging, of saying yes when you meant no, of being present in rooms where your soul had already left. And now you are learning something new, that you are allowed to protect your peace without guilt. That you can belong to yourself before you belong to anyone else. That your presence in your own life matters more than your presence in someone else's. And still, even now, a part of you may worry, will this make me alone forever? Will I lose connection if I choose solitude? But Jung offers reassurance here. He reminds us that true connection only arises after we have connected with ourselves. That the relationships worth keeping will not demand you abandon your depth. They will honor it, and those that fall away, they were built on a version of you that no longer exists. So let them fall. Let the invitations remain unanswered. Let the door stay closed, not out of bitterness, but out of reverence. Reverence for the sacred work unfolding within you. This is not just a phase, this is a turning point. You are no longer living from the outside in, you are living from the inside out, and from that place every choice becomes more honest. Every interaction becomes more intentional. Every moment becomes more real. This is what happens when you stop apologizing for your solitude. When you see it not as absence, but as presence, not as avoidance, but as alignment. You are no longer afraid of being alone because you are no longer afraid of being with yourself. And in that companionship with your breath, your truth, your silence, you find the kind of peace that can't be given by others, only discovered within. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." You are awakening. Not in fireworks, but in quiet moments. Not in crowded rooms, but in your own empty space. And that space is not empty at all. It is full of truth, of healing, of self. So when the visitor doesn't come, when the phone stays silent, when the day passes without interruption, you no longer feel forgotten. You feel found, because you are not waiting for someone to arrive. You have already arrived here in yourself in this sacred solitude.
There is one truth the narcissist never wishes you to glimpse. It is not your accusations that shake them, nor the storm of your rage, nor even the river of tears that may pour from your wounded soul. These do not disturb them, on the contrary, they thrive upon them, feeding as parasites upon your emotional outpourings. What truly unsettles them, what chills the marrow of their being, is the presence of a super empath. This rare figure is not merely sensitive, but seer-like, one who perceives with a depth that penetrates beyond appearances, one who cannot be swayed by theatrical masks or ensnared by elaborate illusions. The super empath carries eyes sharpened by suffering and a heart resilient enough to set unyielding boundaries. Their silence is not emptiness, but a force, a mirror reflecting the void within the narcissist. For where ordinary souls are deceived by false charm, by carefully woven psychological games, the super empath remains steady, reclaiming what matters most, their inner strength, their dignity, their self-respect. To the narcissist, such a person is not merely an obstacle, but the embodiment of terror itself. The stage upon which this drama unfolds is one of masks. Have you ever gazed upon someone who dazzled with sweetness, whose smile radiated like a sun you longed to bask in, and thought, here is the perfect companion, surely here is love, here is loyalty, here is safety. Yet slowly, thread by thread, the golden fabric frays, the honeyed words sour, the warmth grows cold, and behind the mask yawns a desolate void. This, in truth, is the narcissist, a creature who survives through illusion. They are actors by instinct, shapeshifters by necessity, masters of the stage. One day they play the devoted lover, another, the trustworthy confidant, another still, the tireless colleague. They slip into roles with an ease that astonishes, for they have memorized the secret longings of others and dress themselves accordingly. But beneath these roles lies nothing solid. Beneath the paint and polish rests a fragile, fractured soul that cannot endure the weight of its own emptiness. Their nourishment comes not from authentic love, but from the reflection of themselves in the gaze of others. You are not loved for who you are merely the mirror that feeds them their own image. Most people are seduced by this dance because every human heart craves warmth, validation, the soft touch of belonging. When the narcissist floods you with affection, when they sculpt themselves into the very dream you have harbored, you feel chosen. Yet when the cracks appear, you do not immediately question them. Instead, you doubt yourself. You whisper, "Perhaps if I love harder, endure longer, become more patient, the golden days will return." And so you fall deeper into their web, surrendering piece by piece of your soul. But there exists a different kind of soul, the super empath, who does not bend before this performance. Their listening is not with ears alone, but with the intuitive fibers of the heart. They notice the strain hidden behind the perfect smile, the hollowness lurking in the too perfect gesture, the insincerity flickering in eyes that claim to adore. Where others drown in illusion, the super empath remains above the surface, observing, discerning, refusing to rush into the trap. This perceptive power is not born out of comfort. It is forged in the crucible of deep wounds. The super empath has known betrayal, has tasted the bitterness of being used, has walked through despair after giving their all. But instead of allowing pain to calcify into cynicism, they transmuted it into wisdom. The wound became the site of initiation. In Jung's language, they confronted their shadow, wrestled with it, and emerged not fragmented, but integrated. What once was a breaking became a reforging. Now they discern with clarity between genuine care and counterfeit concern. They place their trust with precision, guided by intuition rather than appearances. Their scars, once marks of defeat, have become the sacred tattoos of survival, the very sword they now wield. Thus, when the narcissist encounters such a being, their carefully orchestrated performances collapse into futility. For what the narcissist fears is not your fury, nor your resistance, nor your cries. What they dread is the unflinching gaze that pierces their disguises. To be seen through is to be annihilated. The narcissist thrives only as long as the illusion is believed. But when the super empath gazes upon them, perceiving the barren emptiness at their core, panic overtakes them. Suddenly the mask holds no power. Deception crumbles. Manipulation becomes impotent. Imagine the narcissist accustomed to endless applause, addicted to the theater of control. And then imagine the curtain rising on a new scene, but their audience is gone. No one is watching. No one is reacting. For the super empath has departed from the script. The performance dissolves, for a play without an audience is not a play at all. This is why only the super empath can truly unravel the narcissist's dominion. Not through louder accusations, not through fists of revenge, but through the quiet, unyielding strength of truth. You may scream, argue, plead, it matters not. But when you cease to believe, when your clarity outshines their shadow, when you no longer feed them with reaction, the game ends at once. The power of the super empath is not the thunderous roar, but the stillness of perception. The truth once seen, even unspoken, strikes heavier than any weapon. It is the verdict the narcissist cannot bear, the verdict of exposure, the verdict of no one believing in their performance any longer. So if you doubt your own strength, remember this: you need not be merciless to prevail. You need only to see. And once you truly see, once you perceive the mask for what it is, no narcissist can ever enslave you again. For vision itself is liberation. And liberation, when embodied, is the one thing they can never take from you. There is one addiction that fuels the narcissist more than any other: the desperate hunger for attention. To be seen, to be heard, to provoke this, is their lifeblood. It does not matter if the attention comes bathed in adoration or dripping with rage. Love, anger, despair, all are but different flavors of the same nectar. Every reaction you offer, whether tears or fury, becomes food for their hollow ego. They are like starving phantoms who can only exist if you feed them your emotional energy. And this is why silence terrifies them more than any scream. For silence denies them their oxygen. Silence is the abyss in which their performance echoes unanswered. When you cease to respond, they are stripped of existence in your world. This absence to them is not mere indifference, it is death. Most people, when attacked by a narcissist, fall into the trap of reaction. The manipulation begins with a provocation, a baseless accusation, a calculated insult, a manufactured drama. Instinctively, we explain, defend, plead. We rush to prove ourselves, to protect our dignity. And in doing so, we hand them exactly what they desire, our attention. Each word of defense, each tear shed, each raised voice becomes nourishment. The narcissist smiles inwardly, for the game is working, but the super empath takes another path. They understand a truth simple yet devastating. Every reaction is a gift the narcissist is attempting to steal, and when that gift is withheld, the entire stage collapses. Picture the familiar scene of conflict. The narcissist hurls accusations, weaving chaos into the air. They demand you engage, that you dance with them in their theater of distortion. But the super empath sits still, eyes calm, lips closed. No anger, no pleading, no noise, only silence. And in that silence, a mirror is raised. The narcissist sees themselves a performer wailing into a void where no audience remains. They grow unsettled. Their confidence falters. For without your reaction, their power disintegrates. They are left to face what they fear most, the truth of their own emptiness. Carl Jung once observed that neurosis thrives in noise, but healing often emerges in silence. Silence is not absence, it is presence without surrender. It is a conscious withdrawal from the battlefield of the narcissist's making. For the super empath, silence is not weakness, it is strategy, a declaration without words. I will no longer play your game. Every tear once shed, every explanation once given, every desperate justification, these were once the rivers that fed the narcissist. But when the super empath seals the well, the narcissist is left gasping. Imagine a boxing match. One fighter throws punch after punch, each blow seeking to land. But the opponent, the super empath, does not dodge, does not counterstrike, does not even flinch. They simply stand calm and unmoved. Blow after blow falls into emptiness. The fighter tires, grows desperate, unravels. Such is the fate of the narcissist when silence becomes the super empath's weapon. Buried deep in every narcissist is an unspoken dread, the fear of being ignored. Hatred they can endure. Hatred is still a form of recognition. Even rage binds you to them, tethering your energy to their existence. But to be ignored, to be erased from your mind, that is annihilation. For a being who survives only through recognition, being forgotten is the cruelest fate. And so the silence of the super empath becomes their nightmare. It is not retreat. It is not cowardice. It is sovereignty. To remain silent is to say, I am no longer defined by your chaos. I choose peace over your storm. Silence does not shrink the soul, it enlarges it, reminding the empath of their own vast interior, untouched by manipulation. The narcissist, bewildered by this refusal, begins to stumble. They flail harder, throwing new accusations, weaving new lies, staging greater dramas. Yet the more they scream, the more obvious their emptiness becomes. Silence stretches like a vast horizon, and in it their illusions crumble. Their words lose weight, their tactics collapse under their own contradictions. The narcissist, once towering in dominance, begins to shrink. This is the paradox. Silence, though, without sound, resounds louder than any cry. Silence is the unsheathed sword of the empath. It slices through the tangled web of psychological games. It is the reminder that the narcissist has no true power beyond what you give them. In Jungian terms, silence is the act of withdrawing projection. For the narcissist thrives when you project onto them your hopes, your fears, your need for validation. When you stop projecting, when you simply observe, you reclaim those projections as your own. You integrate them into yourself, into that deeper wholeness Jung called individuation. And at that moment, the narcissist ceases to be your captor, for you have repossessed your own soul. Do not mistake silence for passivity. It is an active force. It is the hand that refuses to play the puppet's strings. It is the act of stepping out of their theater altogether. In silence, you reclaim authorship of your story. So, remember, this silence is not escape. It is resistance. It is refusal. It is the fire that consumes every manipulative script. For the narcissist, silence is unbearable because it carries the loudest message of all: I have reclaimed myself, and you no longer have the right to touch me. There is a hidden truth most people overlook. The narcissist is not strong. Their apparent strength, their commanding presence, their confident airs, all of these are borrowed garments stitched together from your acquiescence. Their only real power lies in the absence of your boundaries. Like an intruder slipping through an unlocked door, they probe the soft places, the unguarded moments, the cracks in your compassion. They do not need fists. They only need your silence when they take your hesitation, when they demand your fear, when you try to say no. This is why the super empath terrifies them. For the super empath has walked the path of being consumed, drained, left hollow after giving everything. And from that fire they learned something essential. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness, it is self-betrayal. Love without limits is not love, it is slavery. The super empath understands now that dignity is not preserved by pleasing others, but by guarding one's own soul. Boundaries to the super empath are not walls of cruelty. They are shields of love, love for the self, and love for the sacredness of what it means to be human. With calm, steady firmness, they draw invisible lines. This is where I end. This is where you cannot cross. For the narcissist, colliding with such lines is bewildering. They have grown accustomed to slipping unchallenged into the lives of others, extracting attention, demanding sacrifice, testing compassion until the reservoir runs dry. But when they encounter the boundary of a super empath, they meet a force they cannot manipulate. They push, but the line does not bend. They guilt, but the empath does not yield. They weep, but the gate does not open. And in this resistance, the narcissist feels the sting of their own impotence. Picture the familiar scenario. The narcissist floods you with messages, demands you answer. At midnight, insists you revolve your world around their whims. Once you might have rushed to comply, fearful that refusal meant rejection. But the super empath no longer bargains with such illusions. They answer calmly, I am not available at this hour. I will not sacrifice my peace to serve chaos. These words are not harsh, they are simply truthful. They are declarations of self-worth. Boundaries, in essence, are the immune system of the soul. Without them, toxicity enters unchecked, draining vitality. With them, health returns. Studies in psychology confirm this. Individuals who hold firm boundaries suffer less stress, recover more quickly from hardship, and resist toxic entanglements with greater ease. And for the super empath, who feels with an intensity that often overwhelms, boundaries are not optional, they are essential. They transmute sensitivity into resilience, compassion into strength. Of course, the narcissist will attempt to breach these boundaries. They will use guilt. If you loved me, you wouldn't say no. They will wield blame. You are selfish, you only think of yourself. They will play the victim. I have no one but you. But the super empath, seasoned by suffering, no longer bends to these scripts. They know that love without freedom is not love. They know that kindness which demands self-erasure is not kindness. They have seen through the deception, and they stand firm. And here is the difference. Most people, when they set boundaries, feel guilt. They tremble at being judged as cold fear, being abandoned for refusing. But the super empath has already walked through abandonment. They have already endured being discarded after giving everything. They know that guilt is merely another trap, another chain forged by manipulation. So instead of guilt, they feel liberation. Each no spoken is a yes to their own peace. Each line drawn is a declaration, I am worthy of respect. I am whole unto myself. Jung spoke often of the self, the archetype of wholeness, the center of psychic life. To move toward the self is to claim sovereignty, to no longer be defined by the demands of others, but by one's own inner truth. Boundaries are the milestones of this journey. They are the signs that the soul has remembered itself. Think of a garden. Without a fence, it may be beautiful for a time, but soon it is trampled, consumed, destroyed by those who take without giving. But with a boundary, a simple fence, the garden thrives open to the sun, to the rain, to those who come in reverence, but guarded against those who come only to destroy. The super-empath tends to their inner garden this way. They do not close their heart, but they protect its sacred soil. And for the narcissist, nothing is more unbearable. Their power depends entirely on breaching your limits. Without access, they starve. Without control, they wither. Each boundary declared by the super-empath is a reminder you no longer hold sway. You cannot possess what you cannot invade. The narcissist rages, pleads, panics, but to no avail. For the super-empath knows this secret: to set a boundary is not to lose love. It is to discover true love. Love for the self and love for those who honor rather than exploit the soul's worth. Thus, in the hands of the super-empath, boundaries are not merely defense. They are transformation. They turn sensitivity into power, compassion into sovereignty. And when the narcissist collides with them, they do not merely stumble, they collapse. For their life depends on the absence of limits, and the moment those limits are declared, their dominion ends. If there is one force the narcissist cannot bear, it is truth. They can endure your accusations, for accusations can be twisted. They can withstand confrontation, for confrontation can be reframed into drama. They can even tolerate your anger because anger still anchors you to them. But when truth enters like a blade of light piercing the shadow, their kingdom of illusions begins to collapse. The narcissist is at their core a storyteller. They weave elaborate narratives about themselves. They are always the hero, the martyr, the misunderstood genius. When mistakes arise, blame is shifted outward. When failures occur, they sculpt tales that cast them as the innocent victim. Each lie is a stone in the fortress that shields their fragile ego. But this fortress is built on sand, and it trembles at the first tremor of truth. Most people remain silent before the narcissist's performance. They fear conflict. They fear isolation. They fear the venom that comes when you dare to challenge the script. But the super-empath does not tremble. The super-empath sees not only the falsehoods, but has the courage to name them. Calmly, without theatrics, without rage, they speak, "That is not true." And in those 3 words, the narcissist's empire begins to unravel. For what the narcissist cannot endure is exposure. Imagine an actor who has spent their life perfecting their role, believing the stage lights will never dim. Suddenly a hand tears away the mask, and the audience sees the trembling, broken person beneath. That humiliation, that unmasking, is the fate the narcissist fears above all. The super-empath does not reveal truth to wound, but to heal. They understand that lies are not just chains for themselves, but snares for others, the trusting, the gentle, the vulnerable, who may fall prey next. By naming truth, the super-empath becomes both liberator and shield. They break the cycle not only for themselves, but for those who have not yet awakened. Picture a gathering of friends. The narcissist begins their performance twisting facts, placing blame, polishing their own image. Most nod silently, unwilling to stir conflict. But the super-empath, steady and composed, interrupts. That isn't what happened. Here's the truth. No accusation, no malice, only clarity. And suddenly the room shifts. The veil lifts. The group sees through the illusion, and the narcissist stands exposed. This is the decisive power of truth. It requires no volume, no aggression, only courage. Once spoken, truth echoes. It reverberates within those who hear it, dismantling deception piece by piece. And for the narcissist, whose entire existence is sustained by illusion, it is a mortal blow. Carl Jung taught that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. The narcissist embodies this law. They bury themselves in stories to avoid the abyss of their emptiness. But when truth is revealed, they are forced, if only for a moment, to glimpse that abyss. And in that glimpse, terror overtakes them. Yet the super empath does not wield truth as vengeance. They wield it as justice, for they know that silence in the face of deception is complicity, and complicity is what allows the cycle to continue. Truth, then, is not only personal liberation, but collective protection. It is the antidote that breaks the spell for everyone watching. What makes the super empath so dangerous is not their voice alone, but their clarity. They do not argue to prove themselves right. They do not shout to dominate. They simply allow reality to speak, and reality is stronger than illusion. Imagine the narcissist weaving lies with confidence, spinning webs of manipulation. Then imagine the super empath standing like a mirror reflecting only what is real. Each distortion falls flat. Each deception unravels in the light of simplicity. In that still, unshakable truth, the narcissist finds themselves stripped, powerless, trembling. For their power was never real. It existed only as long as others believed. And when the super empath speaks, truth, belief dissolves. The mask is shattered, the spell undone. The narcissist is left standing alone, no longer a magician, but a frightened child caught in their own game. This is why truth is the final blow, the decisive strike in the silent battle. It does not wound the body, it dismantles the illusion. And when illusions collapse, the narcissist collapses with them. So remember this, your voice is more powerful than their performance. You need not shout to wield it. You need only dare to name what is real. For truth once spoken is a light that no shadow can endure. There is a weapon more subtle, yet far more devastating to the narcissist than any confrontation or unmasking the power of healing and rebirth. For what the narcissist ultimately seeks is not just your attention, not merely your affection. They seek to break your spirit. They long to see you dependent, to convince you that without them, you are nothing. They aim to wound you so deeply that you forget your own strength, that you doubt your own worth, that you surrender your very identity. But the super empath does not remain broken. Yes, they bleed. Yes, they collapse. Yes, they pass through nights where every breath feels like despair. Yet they do not remain in that darkness. Instead, they choose the sacred work of healing. They face their wounds not with denial, but with reverence, touching their pain, naming it, and then transmuting it into wisdom. This journey is not easy. It is the crucible of rebirth. For while the narcissist lives on illusion, the super empath lives on transformation. The very suffering that was meant to enslave them becomes the fire that forges them. In Jungian terms, this is individuation itself, the path through shadow into the self, the integration of brokenness into wholeness. The wound, once a mark of victimhood, becomes the initiation into sovereignty. Picture a woman once shattered by manipulation. She was told she was worthless until she almost believed it. She was gaslit until she doubted her own memory, her own reason. Yet instead of allowing those lies to calcify into her identity, she began a journey inward. She sat in silence, listened to her breath, found solace in books that awakened her soul, sought stillness in nature where her heart could remember itself. Day by day, piece by piece, she gathered the fragments of her being, until one day she realized she had not merely survived, she had become a new creation. Stronger, clearer, radiant, with an inner light no one could extinguish. This is the power of rebirth. Each time the super empath rises from ruin, they are not the same as before. They emerge immune to the same manipulations that once ensnared them. The lies, the flattery, the emotional theatrics, these tricks lose all potency. For the person who has already walked through the fire does not fear the flame again. The narcissist trembles before this transformation, for they cannot understand it. They cannot control it. To them, pain is the ultimate weapon. But the super empath shows that pain can be alchemized into power, that wounds can become wisdom, that ruins can become foundations for a new life. And in that revelation, the narcissist's greatest weapon turns to dust. Modern psychology names this phenomenon post-traumatic growth, the capacity of human beings to not merely recover from suffering, but to emerge from it stronger than before. Survivors of deep wounds often develop greater resilience, deeper empathy, clearer purpose. The super empath embodies this truth. They are proof that no manipulation, no cruelty, no betrayal can define a soul that chooses to heal. Healing does not mean forgetting. Healing means remembering without fear. It means revisiting the darkest memories and discovering they no longer control you. It means standing in the place of your deepest wound and realizing it has become your deepest strength. And rebirth goes further still. It is not only about rising from the ashes, but about stepping into a life no longer dictated by the past. It is the moment when you no longer live in reaction to what was done to you, but in creation of who you choose to be. Imagine the narcissist returning, certain they can replay their old tricks. They smile with familiar charm, whisper the same promises, weave the same illusions. But the super empath reborn no longer trembles. They listen without fear, they watch without attachment, and when the moment comes, they smile not with hatred, not with vengeance, but with peace. In that calm gaze, the narcissist sees the truth, their power is gone. For the reborn soul does not need the narcissist's validation. They do not crave their approval. They have found love within themselves, respect within themselves, wholeness within themselves. And what can the narcissist offer someone who is already whole? Nothing. Their currency of manipulation is rendered worthless. The declaration of rebirth is not loud, but it is final. You cannot destroy me. You may wound me, but I will rise stronger. You may try to erase me, but I will write myself anew. This is the truth. The narcissist cannot bear. They cannot control a soul that has chosen to heal. They cannot imprison a spirit that has been reborn. And in this, the super empath achieves the ultimate victory, not only freedom from the narcissist, but transformation into a self more radiant, more resilient, more untouchable than ever before. So if you carry scars, do not see them as proof of weakness. See them as maps of your becoming. For every scar is a doorway into wisdom, every wound a path to rebirth. And the moment you choose to walk that path, you step into a power no narcissist can ever steal. There is a secret the narcissist never wishes you to discover. Their entire game depends upon your impatience. They provoke, and you rush to respond. They accuse, and you scramble to defend. They twist reality, and you throw yourself into endless explanations. In this cycle, they control the rhythm. Every beat is theirs, every reaction your surrender. But the super empath has mastered a weapon the narcissist cannot endure: patience. To the narcissist, patience is unbearable, for it dissolves their sense of power. They live on immediacy, on the spectacle of instant chaos. They need your outrage in the moment, your tears in the moment, your panic in the moment. When the expected reaction does not come, their script collapses. Patience for the super empath is not passive. It is deliberate strategy. It is the refusal to be rushed into the chaos of another. It is the stillness of a mountain while storms swirl around its peak. With patience, the super empath lets the narcissist reveal themselves, unraveling through their own contradictions. Imagine the narcissist staging one of their elaborate dramas. They accuse you of something you did not do. They inflate small mistakes into grand betrayals. They speak louder, faster, pressing you to react. In the past, you would have risen immediately, defending, justifying, collapsing into exhaustion. But now the super empath waits. They listen silent. They watch calm. They respond not with frantic denial, but with stillness. And in that stillness, the narcissist begins to stumble. Lies tangle upon lies, contradictions surface. The mask slips. For deception cannot endure the long gaze of time. Carl Jung wrote of the shadow, that hidden, repressed part of the psyche that constantly seeks expression. The narcissist spends their life projecting their shadow outward, fleeing from it, burying it under masks and manipulations. But when confronted with the patience of the super empath, there is nowhere to run. Time itself becomes a mirror. Their shadow crawls closer and their facade begins to crack. Patience, then, is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the art of allowing the narcissist to destroy themselves with their own compulsions. The more they demand reaction, the calmer the super empath remains. The more they push, the more the empath withdraws into silence. In this inversion, power shifts. The narcissist, once conductor of chaos, finds themselves playing alone while the orchestra has departed. There is also a hidden gift in patience, the preservation of the soul's energy. Anyone who has wrestled with a narcissist knows the exhaustion of endless debates, the depletion of trying to prove one's truth against a wall of denial. But the super-empath, by choosing patience, refuses to waste their essence. They save their strength for what truly matters, not proving, not defending, but deciding. Deciding to walk away, deciding to rebuild, deciding to create a life no longer ruled by another's script. Consider two chess players. On one side, the narcissist moves frantically, desperate to trap, to win, to dominate. On the other, the super-empath waits calm, letting impatience do its work. And as every hurried move exposes the narcissist's weakness, the patient player emerges victorious not by force, but by allowing the opponent's haste to destroy them. This is the irony. The narcissist, in their hunger for instant control, sows the seeds of their own collapse. Their lies cannot withstand the scrutiny of time. Their manipulations cannot remain coherent when observed without rush. Their need for dominance makes them reckless, and recklessness is their undoing. Patience in the hands of the super-empath is a message louder than any words. I am no longer a puppet in your theater. I no longer move when you pull the strings. I choose my own timing. I write my own story. Yes, patience is demanding. It requires mastering one's instincts, resisting the reflex to defend, to react, to prove. But each moment of patience is a reclaiming of power. Each pause, each silence is a declaration that the narcissist no longer governs your emotions. And with time, a miracle unfolds. The narcissist's words lose their sting. Their accusations lose their weight. Their provocations reveal themselves for what they are: childish performances, absurd and hollow. The narcissist, once towering in intimidation, begins to appear small, unstable, even ridiculous. Meanwhile, the super-empath stands calm, steady, untouched. They know the truth. Time always sides with reality. Lies decay, illusions rot, performances collapse. What endures is only what is real, and patience is the vessel that carries truth until the illusion has destroyed itself. So if you find yourself facing the storm of a narcissist, remember, you do not need to win every argument. You do not need to shout louder, defend harder, prove yourself endlessly. You need only to wait. For patience is not silence alone, it is time aligned with truth. And truth, in the end, unmasks all. After all has been said, one truth becomes undeniable. The narcissist is not invincible. Their power is not real. It is borrowed, fragile, dependent upon your blindness, your silence, your surrender. They are mighty only so long as you have not discovered your own strength. But once you awaken, once you reclaim yourself, their dominion collapses like a castle of sand at the tide's edge. To become a super-empath is not to be unscarred. On the contrary, it is to be marked by pain, but transfigured by it. The super-empath has walked through fire. They have tasted betrayal. They have felt the loneliness of abandonment. They have doubted their own worth. They have cried. They have fallen. They have broken. But every crack in their soul became the place where light entered. Every wound became an initiation, every collapse a preparation for rebirth. And when they rise, they do not rise merely to survive. They rise to shine. They rise to stand as living proof that suffering does not have the final word. For the narcissist lives in illusion, but the super-empath walks in truth. The narcissist survives by controlling others, but the super-empath thrives through freedom. The narcissist feeds on reactions, but the super-empath draws power from stillness. This is why only the super-empath can truly end the narcissist's reign, not by revenge, not by louder noise, not by wielding greater force, but by becoming untouchable, by embodying the self in Jung's vision, whole, steady, individuated, by integrating shadow and light, wound and wisdom, fragility and strength, until they are no longer fragmented but complete. And here lies the call to you. If you feel these words stirring something in your heart, it is not coincidence. It is recognition. Deep within you already carry the seeds of this strength. You are not waiting to be given power. It has always been there, waiting for you to claim it. You need not seek salvation in another. You need not prove your worth to the one who exploited it. Your worth has been with you since the beginning, and no narcissist can erase it. The journey, then, is not about defeating them. It is about awakening yourself. It is about seeing clearly, wielding silence, setting boundaries, speaking truth, healing wounds, waiting with patience. It is about becoming the author of your story rather than the character in theirs. And when you do, the narcissist vanishes from power. For their spell breaks the moment you remember who you are. So, if you have suffered, let your suffering become your sword. If you have been scarred, let your scars become your wisdom. If you have been broken, let your breaking become your rebirth. You do not need to fight louder. You do not need to descend into their chaos. You need only to become whole. And wholeness once attained is the one thing no narcissist can ever touch. Look around you. There are others still trapped in the narcissist's web, still doubting themselves, still gaslit into silence, still believing they are powerless. Your awakening is not only for you. It becomes a light for them, a signal in the darkness that freedom is possible. Every truth spoken, every boundary held, every wound healed, is not just your liberation. It is the liberation of countless others who may see your strength and remember their own. And so this is the final revelation. The narcissist may believe they are unbeatable. But their belief is yet another illusion. For real power does not lie in control, nor in manipulation, nor in feeding upon the pain of others. Real power lies in steadfastness, in freedom, in the choice to rise from ashes and become reborn. That power has always been in your hands.